on this computer. Great. So it is now preparing, and it's saying preparing live.
Interesting.
Although it says recording as well, so I'll stop live stream. Oh, I've just had to stop a live stream, so is it worth me just trying one more time?
Yeah.
Preparing live stream preview. Yeah, it's just got that spinny wheel again.
Okay, so yeah, if you stop live.
Stop live stream, cool. So it is still recording though, so that's good.
Cool. Great. Let's just give it a 5-second pause. I'll introduce and I'll leave meeting, but leave it running. Cool. So hi there, welcome to Unpack Lunch again. So we're not live today, which is a bit of a shame, but we've had a few technical issues. It's not quite worked how I wanted. Normally we would love this to be a live Q&A where you can feed into it. We're not able to do that today, but we're hoping to reinstate that soon. However, we'd love to know your questions. If you've got questions off the back of the talk on Sunday, if you've got things you'd love to know, please do drop a comment on this video. Yeah, we can monitor this throughout the week and we'd love to kind of answer those questions or feed into that. Yeah, so anything you've got thoughts about the topic in hand, or yeah, just questions about it, we'd love to hear from you. So if you didn't get a chance to see Sunday, as always, I'm just going to let you know that you can catch up. That's forgechurch.com. On there's a whole catch up area where you can watch any of the talks that we've put out over the last little while, and we'd love you to do that and encourage you to do that. But for now, I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Jonny Abbott Steve Fenning as they unpack Sunday's talk together. So guys, take it away.
Great, Finn, thanks very much. Hey, really glad you're joining us for this. Yeah, the idea is for us to be able to talk with the speaker and to unpack some of the things that he was saying or she was saying on the Sunday or during the Sunday talk. So Jonny, welcome. You are in the hot seat today. And I hope you're feeling ready for this. I've got a few questions lined up for you. The theme for Sunday was no filter. It's part of our no filter series, and it was called comment. And you were talking about the power of words. So tell me, you must be someone who's put their foot in it through things that you said that you wished you hadn't, that you wished you could go back and press delete as if it had never existed. So come on, fill us in. Tell us a story where that was the case for you.
So, right. So I think the scariest thing about that question is that I probably put my foot in it all of the time, but probably without realizing. So that's probably the scarier part for me. Probably better stories, and people are like, why isn't he telling this story? But the chances are I just didn't even realize that I did it. So the one that comes to mind would be, so I used to work for an organization called The Mix. I used to work front of house on a Saturday morning, effectively just welcoming people into the building. And when I was sitting there one Saturday morning, and it's, you know, I get up quite early to do it, and so I was quite tired. Some friends walked in, Bex, John, and their son, Zach. So I'm sort of friends with them, friends with their family. And they went through, had their breakfast. And as they came out, we sort of got chatting. And at the end, Bex said to her son, Zach, who's must have been sort of 3 or 4 years old, just said, oh, say goodbye to Jonny. And he sort of said, goodbye, mummy. And of course, I'm not mummy. So she said, that's not mummy, that's Jonny. Now, it's worth explaining at this point that for me, there is only one Mother Sargent, and that's Bex's mum, and we all kind of know her, it's Anne Sargent. And so in my head, I was talking about Anne, and I heard Zach say mummy, thinking of Anne. And so I just said, although to be fair, both are exquisitely good-looking human beings, thinking I'd be a little bit funny. And of course, they heard that as me just calling Bex an exquisitely good-looking human being. And so she gave me this weird look of like, oh, thanks, Jonny. And John just gave me this dirty look of like, my wife. And I didn't even click until they left the building. And then I realized and thought that was really awkward. So I put my foot in my mouth all the time, and probably without even realizing it. And so
Jonny Abbott, hitting on a married woman, hey?
I think it was the first time. But again,
yeah. Okay, right. Let's. How about because not everyone will have heard your message from Sunday yet, but they're going to be rushing to it fairly soon. But fill us in. Just give an overview of your message, the key things, really.
Sure. So part 2 of No Filter, we've looked at these different things that we have, the elements of social media: liking, commenting, sharing and blocking. So we're in episode 2, commenting, all about the words that we say. And so started off with a story of Stanislav Petrov, who, in the Soviet Union was sitting by a computer where he just saw that the US had supposedly launched 5 ballistic nuclear missiles towards the Soviet Union. He had 20 minutes to make a phone call to let his commanders know so they could take an appropriate response that would have probably led to nuclear war. But instead of making that phone call, he decided to stay silent. Something didn't fit right, and he knew he had to be sure. So he did a computer diagnostic, realized it was a mistake, that it was just the sun bouncing off clouds. And it was his silence, it was his decision not to quickly speak that eventually led to, not nuclear war. And so he said in an interview in 2013 before he died that there was no rule of how long they were allowed to wait before they reported a strike. And I just think that's a great quote. And what if we applied that to all of the words that we said, that we remember there's no rule about how long we have to wait in a heated situation before we give a considered, well-mannered response. And so words matter. We talked about that, and about how whenever I see family breaking up, or friends and just the destruction that they might have, or hurt children or young people or job losses, often it comes back down to the words that we say and just the nature of what they can the nature of what they can bring. They're just so sharp, so dangerous. And so we've got to be careful with what we say. And whilst that's really good advice, actually it's more than that. It's something that, it's the way in which God wanted us to communicate primarily. And that's really significant. It's how he designed us. And so there's loads of consequences to that all the way through God's story of man. Words play an incredibly significant part. And because they're so available, we probably just throw them into a bit more of a menial pile in comparison to what they should be. And so at the end, focused on the words of Viktor Frankl, which kind of reflect quite well a whole bunch of biblical instruction in the New Testament. And he says we must be aware that in any given moment, what's going to be the monument of our existence. And so every word we say becomes this statue that people can come and look at, come and see, come and observe. And whilst we can't change what's happened, we can decide on the next words that we say. And we've got to be aware of who it is that's going to be subject to those words.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Now, this series is called No Filter because it's based around a kind of a social media overall theme, although it applies across life. But social media is definitely a place where people will comment, and you can see some incredibly destructive stuff. You know, you hear of celebrities who speak of just the vile bullying that goes on because someone looks slightly larger than they ought to, or whatever. How do we know when we should comment and when we should stay quiet? You know, should we make jokes about Trump on Twitter? If someone has a really strong opinion on something which we would disagree with, should we comment back? Should we respond back to that comment? It's that, you know, if a company treats us badly, should we post, you know, thank you BT that my internet is so rubbish, you know, I spend all my, you know, should we do that, or should we hold back? What are the boundaries?
Sure. And so one of the things that I said on Sunday was that with the invention of social media and the keyboard, each one of our fingers almost has a mouth to it, and I think that almost represents how we're 10 times more powerful with the words that we say than we ever have been, because we've got 10 more opportunities on Facebook, Twitter, so forth, so forth. And so the words we say online are, I think, equally important. They're there to stay. People see them. Once people see them, you can't take them back. And I think part of the answer to that question can be revealed in the question itself. And what I mean by that is you just gave 3 or 4 completely varying different scenarios from where words can get heated online. And they are all completely different. And so feedback to an organization, where in the reality is on, in modern day, Twitter is now how people feedback to organizations, and organizations have whole staff teams set up in order to be able to respond to customer service. There's a political landscape, there's a social justice landscape, there's so many different things. And so I probably can't tell you exactly the golden bullet in terms of when you should speak up and when you should shut up online. I can tell you what I do, and I can tell you why I do it. And I can say that I've probably thought it through quite a lot as well, because for me, I'm someone who, when I see certain things, particularly politically, because I find that whole sphere just really interesting personally, I can say that whenever I see a tweet like that, I really want to respond. I don't know why, because it's not going to change anything, and it's not going to change anyone's mind or anything like that. I just feel like I want to. And so when it comes to anything online, which I think could be contested or controversial of any sort, I tend to err on the side always of, this probably isn't the place to make that comment. And so however severe the political comment is, and you just think, well, all of my friends agree with that, everyone agrees with me, chances are that not everyone does agree with you. Chances are that it's probably a small part of a conversation that goes far, far wider than what a tweet or a comment could ever possibly capture. And so by entering into that conversation in that way, I think we put up far more barriers than we break through. And we take away from opportunities where we can genuinely bring a voice to a conversation, where minds can be changed and progress can be made, because we want to have a quick snapshot, judgment, decision, comment over the actual well-being of a person. And so I take that really seriously politically. I found that I've had conversations with people around politics and around things like that I would have never have otherwise had if I voiced a political opinion online. I found that, whenever there's a controversial moment around what someone said on TV, I just think, oh man, I can have that conversation with them. And if it's worth it, why don't I put that extra effort in rather than just throw knives at it?
So doesn't that make social media a bit benign though? I mean, you've got...
Yeah, I think, well,
yeah,
large parts of it it does, because isn't that what Twitter's for? But it's interesting, I was listening to a podcast the other day actually that talked about the how Twitter, more than anything, but social media generally, I think, can be encapsulated by it, has created a tribalism within people, that it's, if you believe this, you must belong to that group, and you can't be separated from that. And I think when we get into that mode, it's dangerous, it's unproductive, it's hurtful, and the words we say actually mean less, because they just get grouped in with a whole ideology. So for me, general rule of thumb is that whenever I see something controversial that I want to comment on, I have to ask myself if this is worth commenting on. If this is worth putting my voice into the discussion, surely I would honor myself and honor other people so much more if I chose a more appropriate situation to have this conversation with them, rather than just putting a tiny drop into an ocean that's going to get lost anyway. So that's kind of where I come from when it comes to social media comments.
I think, I mean, I've found that as a leader, have to be so careful of what I post, just because it can be misconstrued, or people can take offence, and people can say, "What are you doing posting that?" Do you know what I mean? It's that whole role model. I think as leaders, we do have to be very careful in how we comment and use social media that way.
I think whenever we use social media, it's like we have to remember with everything you put, with everything you post, and also everything you like and share. People don't even realize that when you click the like button on Twitter or Facebook, that also comes up on everybody else's newsfeed that you liked that thing.
Yes, that's
And so whenever we do that, and it's kind of like people are like, I didn't even realize that people saw that I like that. Whenever we do that, it's like gathering everybody we've ever met in our life, because that's who we add on Facebook, right? Everybody we've ever met, and they surround us in a circle, and you hold up a megaphone and tell everybody what you think. And it's like, none of us in the real world would be that insensitive. None of us in that in the real world would be that, just throw comments away like that. And yet on social media, we do it without thinking about it. And so, always try and remember, however, whatever your political opinion is, or opinion is around anything, around social justice issues, there will always be someone that you know almost certainly that thinks the opposite of you, and they will probably have good reason for thinking it.
Yeah. Okay. I was thinking, if Jesus was here now, what would he tweet? He would still have controversial tweets, wouldn't he? Because he said controversial stuff. And in a sense, what you put on social media ought to be what you're prepared to say face to face anyway, isn't it? Yeah. So when I was asking and saying, doesn't that make everything banal? It doesn't have to be. We can still comment and share stuff. I think it still comes out of a heart. It comes out of a heart of anger or whatever. That's where the issues, or arrogance. That's where the issues will always kind of rise up. You were speaking. You used two quotes. You used two stories, kind of at the start and the end. But in that middle part of your talk, you also raised that actually the Bible has lots to say about what we should and shouldn't say. Of Paul saying that no unwholesome talk should come out of our mouths. Blimey, if we can achieve that one, that's a miracle, isn't it? And so our language has to be affected by our faith. But go on. At the end of your talk, you challenged people to have 3 columns and to do 3 things at the end of each day. Go on, just explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I gave this exercise at the end and explained the 3 different things you put in each column. But as a context to this, what you record tends to grow or tends to get better. And so whether that's exercise, if you record your weight every week and what you're putting in your mouth and what you're lifting or how far you're running, that's probably going to get better. If you record yourself playing a musical instrument, you're going to pick up on things better and notice how you play a little bit better. So you're going to get better. Homework is an exercise where you can routinely see where you're at in terms of where you want to get to, so you get better. Most of us don't ever consider recording our words as we tend to see them just as a little bit more menial. And so I think in changing our mindset and how we see our words as meaning something, and actually that meaning comes power, and with that power it contributes to either tearing something down or tearing people or projects or ideas down or building them up. It really should make us consider what it is that we want to build up and what it is that we want to tear down. And so there are a few better things, I think, to record than the key things that we say in a day. And so the exercise was this: it's just to get a piece of paper or a diary or something you're going to look at, stick it up on the fridge, somewhere you're going to see it, and divide it into 3 columns. And number 1 would just be something I'm glad I said today. Something I'm glad to say I said today. And by putting that, you're considering, was there anything that I said today that was worth it? Anything I said today that actually built someone, that I can say that was a wise use of my words. Number 2 would be things that I want to say tomorrow, and you're planning already. What are the things that I'm going to be productive in tomorrow in the words that I say? And then finally, things that were probably better unsaid. So that would be the exercise. I think one of the fascinating things about how we speak is that we tend to actually speak in patterns. I mean, we often think of thought patterns. We don't tend to think of speech patterns. So an obvious speech pattern would be the way in which we say good morning, good afternoon, good night. That would be a common pattern. Many of us would have patterns on when we say to a loved one that I love you. Maybe it's after a conversation or after they do something or a particular day of the week. We tend to have patterns in the way that we speak. But many of those speech patterns tend to be far more personal and significant. We'd all probably have phrases or utterances that we routinely say in a particular moment that we might not even be aware of. And so by recording some of this stuff each day, it actually helps us recognize them and put them right. And so an example of this would be, if you're at home and you have a housemate, and housemate comes in and sort of says, I ran this far today and this is what I did. And you might sit there and think for a few minutes, well, I didn't say anything that I regretted. But after a while, you might think, but actually, I guess I was probably a little bit dismissive of that physical achievement. I sort of brushed it off and said, oh, good for you, and walked off, and that was fine. But and that's fine, maybe. But you might then think, okay, well, what could that lead to if I said that differently? I mean, what would the alternative lead to? And that's not trivial. By thinking like that, you're actually thinking, man, I'm playing an active part in somebody else's life by the words that I say, and that can change things. And so expand that example to more serious aspects of life and more serious relationships. What could that look like in the life of a child? What could that look like in the life of a spouse or a married couple if people were really consistently thinking around the words that they said? And I think it's that kind of thinking that leads to different consequences. And I think that's how God designs us.
Yeah, I think that's really good, especially of, how many positive things have I said to my child and how many times have I just told them off?
Yeah.
How many times have I nagged my wife or got on to, for not doing something, and how many times have I congratulated? Yeah, I think it's a really positive kind of task to do, really. I like it. It's a good one, Jonny. Nice one. Let me just ask one more question, and that is the guy Stanislav Petrov, whatever his name was, his silence, you said, stopped a nuclear war. That's an extreme situation. So does our silence, or do our words really have that much power, do you think?
And I would say yes. And so whilst we're not always in that situation, our words hold incredible weight. And so they might not lead to a nuclear war, but they might lead to personal wars or personal nuclear moments, but also might lead to personal peace. And I'd also say that actually your words are something that last more than your lifetime. The way in which we speak and the phrases that we have often come from a parent or a grandparent. And so the way in which you're learning to speak at the moment is probably going to be picked up by a child or a grandchild, and who knows what situations they're going to get into. So I would say absolutely yes. And if you don't think this is significant, I was speaking a couple of years ago to a woman who I think was either very influential or part of an organization called Gallup, which is the organization that developed StrengthsFinder, a book that loads of organizations use now to develop staff. And they actually developed a survey of sorts which would accurately predict the probability of a divorce within couples with an accuracy of around, I think it was around 95%, purely based on the words that the couples used when they talked about their spouse. And for me, I just thought that is insane. You can predict whether somebody is going to be divorced as a couple or not by around 95% based on the words that they say about each other. And so that led to my first question of like, man, if I was married, would I want to take that test? But then it led to a second realization of I wouldn't have to. Like, all I'd need to do, and all you need to do, is start to consider, what are the words that I often say to my spouse, and what do they look like? And it really does determine the whole route of where your life could go as a result. There was a similar experiment that I heard about by a speaker called Jordan Peterson, who, incredibly interesting speaker. His podcast I'd really recommend, but he talks about an experiment where you have a man and a woman in a room, and spouse would enter, and they asked one of the spouses to say something almost trivial about a bird outside, and they measured the responses of spouses. And it wasn't even the negative responses of spouses that would lead to couples being divorced. It was actually just almost the brushing off of stuff. It was the not going deeper, not showing any form of interest. It was the meh, that kind of words that led to some of the breakups within marriages. So the words you use are absolutely powerful and absolutely worth recording. And this is more than just practical advice. This is life-changing stuff. And it's stuff that Jesus spoke about. It's stuff that the early church spent loads of time over, and it's stuff that we find right at the very beginning of the story of creation.
Well, So words make or break relationships, basically, within families, friendships, marriages, whatever. Yeah, I get that. I get that. Jonny, thank you. Thank you for what you said. You're speaking this coming Sunday too. Third part of No Filter. Go on. What's the kind of angle, or what's the focus on this coming week?
So we've done like, the little button you click on and you get your little bit of self-worth. We've done comment around the words that we say online. This week we're looking at that button called share. And so log on Sunday, share it with everybody. But it's all around how we want to be seen, not just in social media, but in our lives as well. Stephen Furtick, who's a pastor at Elevation Church in the States, said it brilliantly. He said, what we often do is we compare our everybody else's front of stage with our behind the scenes. And I just think that's an incredibly powerful line, and maybe you want to sit and think around that for a little while. But we're looking at, okay, what is it that we want people to see when they see our lives, and what are the things that we really need to focus with? What are the key things that we need to look at when we present our lives?
Great. Jonny, look forward to that very much. Hey, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm really sorry we're not able to pick up on any of your questions on this. Sorry we couldn't go out live for whatever reason. That didn't work, but we're really, really glad that you joined us. And so join us again next week at 1 o'clock for Unpack Lunch, where Jonny's going to be unpacking this coming Sunday's talk. So we look forward to you joining us then. Thank you. And thanks, Jonny, for what you shared today.
Cheers, Steve. See you, everyone.